Hey now folks, my name is Nick and today we're taking a look at Cube Quest Clash for the Crown from Game Right Games. In this game, it's for 2 players only, and you're each taking control of this different kingdom and you're warring with each other in this epic battle for the ages. Not really. What you're really doing is putting out these mats and having all of these different cubes, which are essentially dice, and you are flicking them across your mat onto your opponent's mat to try to knock his king off of the table, which essentially kills the king and wins you the game. And in the meantime, you'll be knocking off your opponent's other forces and trying to kill them, and he'll be knocking yours off, and sometimes you accidentally knock your own forces off the table from flicking it too hard. It's a silly game, but is it a fun game? Well, let's find out. Alright, Cube Quest is actually a dexterity game. Each side of this 2-player game represents a warring kingdom. You have the same player mats, which you're going to lay out, and you're going to put them together in the center. And there's a little bit of a hump in mine because they're folded in the box, but it doesn't really affect gameplay that much. Each player has a king cube that they start the game with, which you're going to place in anywhere inside your castle on the map. So long as it's at least touching the walls of your castle, you're fine. And then you have a number of other cubes that you can put out on the board. Now, for advanced play, there are actually different types of cubes, which are essentially troops that you can use, and they each have a point value, and you can sort of construct your army out of 40 points worth of cubes. Now, for just the basic game, what they recommend is actually starting with 4 of the striker cubes and then 12 of the grunt cubes. Now, on the cubes have different faces for the regular soldiers, and so for the strikers, only one side of the die does not have a face on it. All the others have faces of the strikers on it, and what that means is that when you flick a cube over into if it lands on your opponent's territory and it lands with the shadow side up, there's a possibility that cube is going to get captured. You'll immediately remove it from your opponent's side of the board and roll it. And if it lands face side up, you're good. You get to take the cube back and put it next onto your castle. But if it lands on the shadow side up, that cube is captured, which means it's basically destroyed, and it is removed entirely from the game. The other type of cube I have out on the field are the grunts. The grunts work the same way, however, they only have 2 sides of their die that have faces on it, which means it's much more likely that they're going to get captured, but you have a lot more of them. You have 12 out on the board now for each side. Now, how the game is actually played. First and foremost, your king has a special ability, which is that if your king is ever not in your castle, you actually get to spend your whole turn to pick the king up from wherever he is and put him back in your castle, following the same rules as long as he's touching the walls. But the goal of the game is to actually knock out your opponent's king. So if you're successfully able to knock out your opponent's king by knocking them off the board, then that other player wins the game. And in fact, if any cube goes off the board, it's just an automatic death for that cube. But assuming you're not going to do the king's move and you're using the basic armies, then on your turn you're just going to take one of the other cubes and you're going to flick it over at your opponent's army, like so. Watch this. This is going to be very embarrassing. Okay, well, that wasn't so bad. So I was able to knock my opponent's cubes around a little bit, and in fact, I was able to land on the face side up, which means that he will stay right there. Don't do what I just did. You're not supposed to pick it up. That's a legal move. But if it's on the face side, it just stays where it is. And now it goes to your opponent's turn. You get 1 flick on your turn, and there's special rules about what happens if you mess up a flick. If you accidentally with your flick, you touch another cube, then your opponent gets an extra free flick on their turn. Or if you accidentally follow through with your arm, your opponent gets a free extra flick, and so on and so forth. If a cube lands on the little center line that connects the 2 maps, so long as it's not fully on your opponent's side, it still counts as being on your side as well. And like I said, any cube that goes off is just dead permanently. And you're basically just going to keep doing this. You're going to keep flicking cubes. There goes one. That one's dead. It was mine. And that one's good. And then my opponent comes back at me and flicks. And his just went right off the map, so it's gone. And you're going to keep doing this. That was a screwed up flick. So then red goes and boom. And he landed, but he's face up, so he's okay. And then boom. So, and this just keeps going on and on until one player has knocked the other player's king straight off the map, and then that player is the winner. It's very quick. It lasts about 10 minutes. Now, assuming you want to do the advanced game, you have some other options for characters with special abilities. So, for instance, the freeze cube. The freeze cubes are not actually ever on the map of the game. Instead, you'll take your entire turn to, it's like a spell, basically. You'll take the cube off the side of the map and put it on your opponent's cubes on top of them. And any cubes that it's actually on top of, they are frozen and they cannot be flicked until your opponent manages to knock the freeze cube off using one of their flicks, which I'm not doing very well. But as soon as that happens, the freeze is just gone from the game permanently. But it's fun because you can put it in such a way that if it's on top of multiple cubes, every cube that it touches is frozen. So that can be kind of fun to do. The other option is the knight. The proper term for it is the helm. The helms are potent attackers. They have 3 captured sides, which means they're a little bit harder to kill than the grunts, but not as hard to kill as the strikers. And you're allowed to flick them twice as long as the first flick lands them in your territory. So if he's over here on this side and you flick him once, he's still on your territory, you get to flick him again, which is pretty good just so you can set yourself up for a better shot. The skulks are interesting, and these are the skulks right here, because they can actually basically sneak into your opponent's territory. So let's say you flick them on over into the map, assuming they land on their face side up, you can actually choose to remove them from the board and place them aside. And on a future turn, instead of flicking at all, you can place one skulk back anywhere in your opponent's territory, as long as it's not touching the castle or another cube. You don't have to do that if you want to, but that's the special ability of the skulk. And finally, the healer. The healer basically just lets you, this is another one where you'll keep it off the board. It's never flicked on its own. They are placed in your territory, but they're never flicked. Instead, you can have the special power to revive some of the cubes that you've lost. So you can take your entire turn to basically whatever cubes you have off the board that were captured, you can roll up to 6 points worth of them, and if they land face side up, you'll get to heal them back. And you can use as many healing cubes as you have on a single turn to get more of them back. And again, you'll build your army from 40 points, and the king is free, and you can have a lot of fun just doing different variations. And it would be interesting to see what different expansions could add to the game, but that's basically Cube Quest. Very silly, very fun dexterity game. All right, so I play a lot of games, and I don't win very often. I mean, that's just what happens when you play a lot of games, and there's certainly way, way, way better game players in my group. But, I win sometimes, and when I win most games, I'm kind of like, I'm happy about it, but I kind of subdue it. I'm like, all right, cool, yeah, great. Because a lot of times, especially in very complicated games, there could be hurt feelings. Some people take the game very seriously. So I try to be more subdued and just, I compliment the other people and say, oh man, that was close and stuff like that. When I won in Cube Quest, I jumped out of my chair. I was like, yeah, I got it. I mean, it's so, because the whole game just lends itself to this silly, ridiculous, almost exciting, I guess is the word, atmosphere. This is just a fun game. Now, it's not really deep. I mean, it's not that. I would make the argument that there is some strategy to it if you decide to go with the quote-unquote advanced rules, which is to say that you're adding the different special power die like the healer and the skulk. And those are very, very fun, but really, even if you're just playing with the base game, the game can be very fun. If you just don't take it too seriously, don't get too hung up on the rules and how your dice lands, and is it totally over on your mat or not? You just can't worry about that with this game. This is just totally about visceral fun. And usually I don't like dexterity games because there's some dexterity games that actually I think are just too complicated and too long for what it is. This is actually a very fast game. I mean, the box, let me see, I think the box says... The box says 15 minutes. I would make the argument that you could easily play this in 10 minutes if you know what you're doing. I mean, if you're just playing with the base stuff. Maybe tack on an extra 5 minutes when you're making your different armies. We did that a couple times, but it just seemed very fast. Like, I want this one, doing all the points and stuff. But really, really cool. It's not a game that requires a ton of thought, but I mean, but it does in a way. I mean, it really... it's funny how you can take a game seriously that's not really meant to be taken seriously, but at the same time, there's no hurt feelings when you lose, and no one gets too upset about it because it's so fast and it's so fun. And watching you making this awesome, like, perfectly placed flick to flick one of your cubes over and just make that decimating move against your opponent, and then watching your own cube just soar over your opponent's mat and hit the back wall, totally missing and killing your own guy. When the game does that, it's hard to take it too seriously and be too concerned about winning, but it just works. I can see this being just an awesome family game, a game to play with kids. I would be very curious to see what you could do with having 2 copies of the game and having like a 4-player game going on. It's probably pure pandemonium. Maybe I don't recommend that, but still, for what it is, I will definitely be pulling this game out as a light filler from time to time, so long as there's not too many people here and I can actually keep control of where the dice are flying and not lose any of them. But that's Cube Quest. Very unexpected. This is one of my Secret Santa gifts. So it was just a game I kind of wanted, but I'm certainly very glad that my Secret Santa from BGG got it for me. Cube Quest from Game Right. Highly recommend it. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way.